Rovering to Success. A Guide for Young Manhood. Lord Baden-Powell of Gilwell. 1922. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Chapter 6. Rock number 5. Irreligion. Atheism. There are a good many men who have no religion, who don't believe in God. They are known as atheists. In Great Britain alone there are 9 societies of these. They are welcome to have their own opinions in this line, but when they try, as they are always doing, to force these ideas on other people, they become enemies of the worst sort. Some of these societies directly attack the religious belief of others in a very offensive way, but I believe that by doing so they are, as a matter of fact, doing more good than harm to the religions concerned, since it makes people buck up and sink their own differences in order to combine together to repel these attacks. Here is a specimen of the gratuitous kind of insult which they offer to the Christian religion. It is one among others which have been quoted in the public press during the last few years. The chief religious ceremony of Christians, known as the Mass, or Communion, which consists of eating the flesh and drinking the blood of this Jew called Jesus, is a disgusting and degrading superstition, and suggestive of a cannibal feast, which in all probability was its origin. Christianity has lowered and perverted the standard of truth in every direction. It is not too much to say that it has debauched the world with falsehood. This to every Christian who believes in his religion is an indecent insult. At the same time it is a direct call to him to action. But I am not going into that here. Apart from the anti-religious there are lots of fellows who, though not violently opposed to religion, are not particularly interested in it. In some cases they have never been shown what it is, in others it has not proved very attractive or inspiring and they have let it slide. Mark Twain said he was averse to discussing religion since it dealt with heaven and hell and he had friends in both places. On the other hand, I have known in the backwoods more than one strongly religious man who as a boy had had no home teaching in religion, but who has realized God for himself through what he has seen of his works and his wonders in the world. Such a man has come to see that he himself was a part and a member of that wonderful creation, but equipped in higher degree than other living animals by having a mind, the power to appreciate beauty, and the sense of goodwill towards others, which meant also that he had something of the Spirit of God inside him. God the Creator is recognized by most denominations of religion, but their differences arise over the actual character of the connection of the Creator with the human soul. In the Christian belief it was held that Jesus Christ came to live among men to interpret and bring home to them the fact that God is love, and that the sacrifices of offerings to God as practiced in the old superstitious religions were not what were wanted so much as the sacrifice of self, and service for God. Religion is essential to happiness. If you are really out to make your way to success, i.e. happiness, you must not only avoid being sucked in by irreligious humbugs, but you must have a religious basis to your life. This is not a mere matter of going to church, of knowing Bible history, or understanding theology. Many men are sincerely religious almost without knowing it and without having studied it. Religion, very briefly stated, means: firstly, recognizing who and what is God. Secondly, making the best of the life that He has given one and doing what He wants of us. This is mainly doing something for other people. That should be your belief, not as a matter of thought for Sundays only, but as one to live up to in every hour and every phase of your daily life. As steps towards gaining these 2 points, there are 2 things I would recommend you to do. One is to read that wonderful old book, the Bible, which, in addition to its divine revelation, you will find a wonderfully interesting storybook of history and poetry as well as morality. The other is to read that other wonderful old book, the Book of Nature, and to see and study all you can of the wonders and beauties that she has provided for your enjoyment. And then turn your mind to how you can best serve God while you still have the life that He has lent you. The Book of Nature. What I am saying here is for those who have no particular religion. Atheists say that they are against the Christian and other forms of religion because these are superstitious rather than guiding principles of life. They maintain that a religion that has to be learnt from books written by men cannot be a true one. But they don't seem to see that besides printed books, and apart from revelation, God has given us as one step the great Book of Nature to read, and they cannot say that there is untruth there. The facts stand before them. Shakespeare speaks of sermons in stones, tongues in trees, books in the babbling brooks, and good in everything. Bacon wrote, "The study of the Book of Nature is the true key to that of revelation." The Quran says, "Seest thou not that all in the heavens and all on the earth serveth God, the sun, the moon, the stars, and the mountains and the trees and the beasts and many men?" I hope I shall not be misunderstood. I do not suggest nature study as a form of worship or as a substitute for religion, but I advocate the understanding of nature as a step, in certain cases, towards gaining religion. This way is one that may appeal where other methods have failed, especially to those who are inclined to be atheists or those who have no religious ideals in particular, or who have had them and have lapsed from them. It may help them, by a new path, to find their church again. The following words by David Grayson, a famous botanist, describe what I fancy must be the experience of a very large number of men in the present day. I have been a botanist for 54 years. When I was a boy, I believed implicitly in God. I prayed to Him, having a vision of Him a person before my eyes. As I grew older, I concluded that there was no God. I dismissed Him from the universe. I believed only in what I could see, or hear, or feel. I talked about nature and reality. And now it seems to me there is nothing but God. Nature knowledge a slip towards realizing God. I know that among our young men of today there is an earnest desire for religion, a religion that they can grasp and act up to. During the war, I had hundreds of young soldiers anxious to sign on to carry out the Scouts' promise and law as something tangible in that direction. Recently I was told of a group of young working men who had become rovers. There were some 30 of them, and they asked their leader to hold a Sunday meeting to teach them something of religion. So for such fellows, I hope that my suggestions may be helpful. The spirit is there right enough, but the form is needed when once they have come to realize something of the divine nature and of His service. There is the Indian legend of the energetic priest who was dissatisfied with the amount of faith in one of his flock. When charged with irreligion, the man explained that he had tried hard but had found that religion was not in his line. The priest thereupon seized him and, plunging his head under water, held him there until he was nearly drowned. By dint of sheer strength and struggling, the man at last managed to break loose. When he remonstrated against this violent treatment, the priest replied, "If you only strove in a world of difficulties to find God's help half as hard as you have been struggling to get breath when in the water, you would soon find Him." The wonders of the forest. If you have never journeyed through the forest of Brazil or West Central Africa, you can hardly imagine the beauty and wonder of a tropical jungle. It recalls even to the most unfeeling mind all the grace and majesty of a cathedral. But despite this, it also hides horror within its dim twilight and soggy vegetation. Through the tangled undergrowth one pushes one's way, with trees overhead shutting out the sunshine and the air. And high above these, the giant cotton trees and other monarchs of the forest rear their heads 200 feet above the ground. But you seldom see these heads when you are groping your way in the ooze and leaf mold amid the creepers, reeds and bush. As you tramp day after day, and it may be week after week, through this same gloom, its beauty is forgotten in continual repetition, and the confinement becomes a horror from which you know there is no escape and no relief. A sick depression holds you in its clutch, in some cases even melancholy and madness come to men. And then at night, as you lie out in the dark, in the soft stillness of the tropical night, the forest is hushed, but there are small voices speaking everywhere. The little chirps of crickets, the song of frogs, the drip and fall of leaves, and the dim whisperings of light breezes playing among the branches away up overhead. Now and again, at long intervals, the stillness is broken by that most impressive of all forest sounds, the roaring, rending crash, as a hoary veteran among the giant trees yields up its long life and falls from its pride of place to be no more seen. There is a moment of tense and, as it were, respectful silence, and then the little voices of the forest carry on their whisperings again. Man seems all out of place and a trespasser here. It is mainly a plant kingdom where insects are admitted. And yet in it all there is life and sensation, reproduction, death and evolution going on steadily under the same great law by which we in the outer world are governed. Man has his nature comrades among the forest plants and creatures. For those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, the forest is at once a laboratory, a club, and a temple. The Great Falls. Abraham Lincoln, as he stood and gazed at the Falls of Niagara, said, "It calls up the indefinite past, when Columbus first sighted this continent, when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led the Israelites through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the hand of his Maker, then, as now, Niagara was roaring here. Older than the first man, Niagara is as strong and fresh today as 10,000 years ago. The mammoth and the mastodon have gazed on Niagara, that long, long time, never still for a moment, never dried, never frozen, never slept, never rested." John Wesley Hill, in recording this, wrote, "These reflections on Niagara embrace the whole subject of creation, the existence of God, the mystery and the power of the universe, the history, redemption, and fate of man. From this recognition of God in nature it requires but a step to a realization of the divine in the affairs of men." It is very true. You will understand it if ever you stand on the edge of that stupendous gorge that constitutes the Victoria Falls, in South Africa. Here the Zambezi, half as wide again as Niagara, hurls its waters down 300 feet into the dark swirling depths below. That roar which one hears some miles away has never ceased, since time was, to shake the air. The zigzag passage 300 feet deep which the river has cut for itself for 40 miles through solid rock speaks to a grinding process not of thou sands but of many thousands of years. One learns here something of the littleness of man, and of his transient efforts at fighting and fussing about petty things that matter not. One realizes, dimly and inadequately it may be, that there is a bigness around us, that there is the Creator God. The beauty of nature. Many town-living fellows never get to realize the beauty of nature because they seldom see it. Their eyes are more trained to looking at shops, advertisements and other people. But with those who have lived with nature, and have come to recognize its beauties, they can, when they come to town, catch glimpses of it even in the dingy streets. At one time in my life I had to cross Westminster Bridge every day about sunrise and again at sunset, and scarcely a day passed when I didn't find myself standing to gaze at the gorgeous colors of the coming or departing of day, and in the pearly gray and lilac tints of the hazy shadows and silhouettes which, thanks to London smoke, make them particularly prevalent there. An artist brother of mine actually went to Newcastle to paint the smoke and steam for their wonderful effects under sunlight and cloud. Why do I love fishing? It is not entirely for the fun of catching fish. I enjoy the day whether I catch any or not. I go to fish, not to catch fish. In the rich lush grass of the meadows, with the golden gleam and the scent of the buttercups, the heavy green of shady trees, one is alone with nature. The humming of the insects, the rippling of the busy water voles, the weird drumming snipe, the blue flashing kingfisher, these and other nature mates become your companions. But there are other scenes than this. Shackleton had a different view when he said that countryside scenery was all very well. That is all right for getting your butter and roast mutton, but there's another kind of scenery that challenges the best in a man's soul. I can't tell you what it means to an explorer marching through a fog in a new land when suddenly the fog lifts and he finds himself looking at mountains no human eye has ever seen. Well, there I agree with him too. I love the homely beauty of the English countryside as I do the vast openness and freedom of the rolling veldt in South Africa. I love the rushing waters and the nodding forests of Canada, but I have been more awed by the depths and heights of the Himalayas and by the grandeur of those eternal snows lifting their peaked heads high above the world, never defiled by the foot of man, but reaching of all things worldly the nearest to the heavens. Hiking. You may say yes, but I can't get to mountains, oceans and primeval forests. How then am I to see and understand the wonders of nature and her messages? Well, you can do almost as much in your own country if you will come away from the town and suburb and get out into the open, into the woods and meadows. With your pack on your back and a staff in your hand or taking with you your little canvas home, your blanket or your cooking pot and freedom. Out in God's open air, drinking in the glories of sky and earth and sea, seeing the color in the woods and fields, scenting the flowers and the hay, hearing the music of the brooks and birds and the whispering wind, getting to know the animals and their ways, till you feel that you are a comrade with them all and find yourself as a part of the great scheme of nature. Human body as an item in nature study. Apart from woods or fields, you need not go farther than your own self for a beginning in nature study. What did you come from? A tiny seed no bigger than a pin's point, yet giving you a body formed of flesh and bone and sinew with a likeness to your own father and mother, strong, and able to obey whatever the mind tells it to do. It has wonderful mechanism in all its parts. Look at your eye, a most delicate and marvelous apparatus beyond anything that man could devise. It gives instantaneous information to the mind of things near or far away, of their ugliness or beauty, their colors and shapes. It reads this page and from the printed letters upon it puts thoughts and ideas into your brain which the brain packs away into store for use later on when needed. Touch this book with your forefinger and think, simple as the action is, yet how wonderful. Eye telegraphs to brain, there is the book at such and such a distance from you, brain tells sinew to move arm, hand and finger to the spot at once. Nerves in fingertip telegraph back at once to brain that the job has been done and that the book is cold or hot, rough or smooth, and so on. Ask Mr. Atheist who it was who invented and made that wonderful machine? And not merely one specimen but millions throughout this wonderful world, alike in minutest details, yet no two exactly alike in mind, body or appearance. Put your finger on your pulse, that is the artery on the front of your wrist directly below your thumb. Or feel your heart in the left center of your chest. There you find the wonderful performance going on of fresh, warmed up blood being steadily pumped through your arteries. These lead to all parts of your body, and the blood is then brought back, dirty, by the veins, to the other side of the heart, to be cleansed by the lungs with fresh oxygen from the air. And that work is going on regularly all the time without your taking any trouble about it yourself, whether you are sleeping or waking, that gallant heart goes on unceasingly at his job. If it were to go on strike and stop work, even for a minute you would be dead. It has its telegraph wires in the shape of nerves which give it messages from the brain the moment that your eyes or ears telegraph something out of the way to the brain. Thus, if there is a sudden loud bang near you or your ear tells you in the night that someone is creeping up to stick you with a knife, ear tells brain and brain tells heart, and heart at once increases its rate of pumping to prepare you for instant action. Also, if you go running or doing extra work uphill, more fresh blood is demanded and you suck in greater gulps of fresh air to replenish the blood, and heart has to get onto the job with redoubled vigor. You owe a great deal to your heart, your health, your very life depends on heart doing its duty to you, and yet a great many people never give a thought to their hearts. It is not good for the heart to be artificially forced to work its valves faster than nature requires. If you force it to do so, the valves get weak and cannot keep the blood freshened, and so you get ill. For instance, if you drink to excess, it sets heart going faster than usual, and if you keep on doing it, it steadily weakens it. Also, if you smoke too much, it does the same, especially in the case of growing lads whose heart muscles have not yet gained their full strength for meeting the strain. The sketch above shows the wonderful arrangement of valves that goes on working in your heart once every second. I have copied it from Dr. Shelley's book, Life and Health, which you should read if you care to see full information put in most interesting form about all the different organs of your body and the work that they do. It is really good reading. Then there is your ear. Have you ever seen a model of the human ear and the marvelous machinery that it every sound to your brain? It would take too long to go into that wonderful apparatus here, but this diagram of the section of an ear will give you some suggestion of what it is like. If every fellow studied a little of his own body and how it works, he would quickly gain a new idea of the miraculous handiwork of God and would realize how He is actually active in your body as well as in your mind. Look at the grain of the skin of your fingertips, with its many circles and turns, take a print of those with ink upon paper, and examine them with a magnifying glass. You may get thousands of other people to do the same, but you will never find one who has them identically like your own. Consider any part of your body and what it does at your command. You begin to realize what a wonderful living machine has been given to your charge to use properly, and you gain a reverence for your own body. Microscopic Nature. Take one drop of moisture from your mouth and put it on a glass slide under a microscope, and you will see that it contains hundreds of little living animals or germs of delicate form and likeness to each other, endowed with life and action, and with powers of feeding and reproduction. Go out into the garden or the nearest park and see those plants, pick a single leaf of the thousands on the tree, and study it through a magnifying glass, compare it with another of the same tree or of a tree of the same family 1,000 miles away. Both will be exactly alike in form and texture, yet each will have its own little minute difference of individuality. Also, each has its own power of breathing and feeling, of feeling warm or cold, health or illness. Each plant has its birth, life, reproduction and death just as any other animal on earth. The wonders and mysteries of nature are unlimited. There are big chances before you fellows of the next generation. So there is material value in studying them, but the more you study them, the more you become humble in the presence of the work of the Creator. Telescope Nature. Look up in the sky. That aeroplane is high, almost out of sight, but what is beyond, far, far above him? Limitless space. Look at it at night through a telescope and you will see that those tiny points of light we know as stars are great suns having planets circling round them, just as round the sun we know this Earth and half a dozen more like it are continually circling at whirling speed. Many of those stars are so distant that the flash of light coming from them, and you know how fast a flash travels, takes 500 years and often much more to reach us. One of them may have gone to bits in the time of Henry V, after Agincourt, but its light would still be coming to us. From tiny microbes seen through the microscope to vast worlds seen through the telescope, one begins to realize what is meant by the infinite, and when one realizes that all things, big and little, are working in one regular order in a great set plan, the stars whirling through limitless space, the growth of mountains in the world, the life and reproduction and death in a regular series among plants and germs, insects and animals, one realizes that a great mastermind and creator is behind it all. The animal world. Animal life is at hand for all to study. There are the birds with their feathers and mechanical arrangements of light bones that enable them to fly, with their nesting ingenuity, their migratory instincts that make some of them travel half the world over. There are the bees, where all but a few are workers for the common good with a wonderful division of duties and sense of discipline. The inner life of a hive is a miracle of organization. Some of the bees collect the pollen, others build up cells of exactly the same shape and size, others come and fill the cells with honey from the flowers for the feeding of the community. The queen bee lays her eggs in the breeding cells where they are guarded by the nursing bees. Fanning bees are placed in regular lines keeping the hive ventilated with their wings, and sentry bees keep out intruders at the door. Then among the greater animals, wild or tame, whether seals or panthers, horses or dogs, all have minds and memories for directing their powers. It is not only the human mother who loves her children. The tigress is equally fond of her cubs, or the partridge of her chicks. And the male will protect his female, whether he be a monkey or a wild boar, just as bravely and as chivalrously as any knight of olden days. Many creatures will sacrifice their lives to protect their young as pluckily as any soldier fighting for his home and country. You may have owned a dog who would defend you and your possessions with his life, if need be, for no reward but because he loved you. And you can see from his actions how he enjoys expressing his affection for you. It makes him happy to carry out your wishes and to do little jobs for you. Man, too, has all these attributes of the animals. He has the mind and the memory, the pluck and the chivalry, the affection and the happiness that animals possess, but he has them on a far higher scale. He can use them all to greater advantage. The soul. As a man, you have this pull over the animal. You can recognize and appreciate both the wonders and the beauties of nature. You can enjoy the golden glory of the sunset, the beauty of the flowers and trees, the majesty of the mountains, the moonlight and the distant views. But there is bound to come in the thought that something more is expected of you than is expected of rooted trees or animals who have limited powers, something more than merely enjoying the sunshine as they do. You have all this extra intelligence, with the ability to apply it. But it is wasted if you don't use it or if you spend it badly, when all around you is the vast universe and God for you to work for. The funny thing is that there has been more fighting and quarreling in the world over religion than for any other cause. It is worse than funny, it is ridiculous, but at the same time true that the more we care for our own religious beliefs, the more narrow-minded we seem to become towards the religious ideas of other people. We forget that we are all sons of the same Father and that we are all striving to do His will, though it may be in different ways. There is one thing, however, that I feel sure of myself, and that is that God is not some narrow-minded personage, as some people would seem to imagine, but a vast spirit of love that overlooks the minor differences of form and creed and denomination, and which blesses every man who really tries to do his best, according to his lights, in His service. Conscience. How can you best serve Him with the intelligence and power that He has given you? If you are in doubt, ask your conscience, that is, the voice of God within you. He will tell you at once what is needed of you. Dogs delight to bark and bite, it is their nature too, but they cannot rise to being large-minded, charitable, helpful, and kind. Men can do this when they really mean business. That is where a man attains his proper footing, namely, when he exercises the divine love that is in him in service for others. Love. In India it is no unusual thing to see a fakir who, for a vow, holds one arm aloft and never uses it. That arm eventually withers away and dies. In the same way that spark of love that exists in every man, if not exercised, wastes away and dies, but if put into practice it grows bigger and stronger and more exhilarating every day. Service is giving up your own pleasure or convenience to lend a hand to others who need it. Well, if you practice service to others day by day in little things as well as big, you will find yourself developing that spark of love within you till it grows so strong that it carries you joyously over all the little difficulties and worries of life. You rise above them, you are filled with goodwill towards men, and conscience, the voice within you, says well done. That love is like mercy, which Shakespeare describes as having a twofold quality, it blesses him that gives as well as him that takes. That love is the bit of God which is in every man that is his soul. The more he gives out of love and charity to his fellow men, so much the more he develops his soul. Professor Drummond, in his work Natural Law in the Spiritual World, has suggested that it is there that lies man's chance of what is known as everlasting life. He develops his soul from being a little bit to being part of God. It is there that he finds the happiness of being a player in God's team. It is there that he finds the joy of heaven, here and now on earth and not vaguely somewhere later on in the skies. There is no superstition about all this, as suggested by your atheist. It is a direct fact, and it lies open to every man, whether he be rich or poor, to enjoy, provided he paddles his way towards it. A step to this end is to read the Bible and trace the history of God's will among men and to carry that will out by your own goodwill and helpfulness to others, and you will be the better man for it and safely pass the rock of atheism on your voyage to happiness. Now don't think from all that I have said in this chapter that I am trying to convert you to some new form of religion, because I'm not. I am only going on the idea that you who read this have not got any strong religious views of your own. I only suggest that the better realization of God may possibly be got through nature study rather than through books. I have known it happen in very many cases among woodsmen, seamen, soldiers, and explorers, who had not otherwise grasped any religious faith. If you find this method does not help you, The next step is to talk with a minister of religion, who can then put you on the right line for gaining the truer religious beliefs. Guiding thoughts from different sources. To be good is one thing, to do good is better. How many observe Christ's birthday? How few his precepts? It is easier to keep holidays than commandments, Franklin. The study of the book of nature is the true key to that of Revelation, Bacon. God is not a friend who thinks only of our religious side. On the contrary, we should find it a help and an encouragement if we looked upon him as a keen friend, interested alike in our games, our work, or our stamp collecting the heart of a schoolboy. Reverence promises freedom from hasty judgment, friendship towards men, and obedience to the gods, Marcus Aurelius. I can see how it might be possible for a man to look down upon earth and be an atheist, but I do not see how he can look up into the heavens by night and say there is no God, Abraham Lincoln. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Matt. 22:37.